Hello there guys, and welcome back to Fire Emblem Month. After two Fire Emblem games on the Super Famicom, it was self-explanatory for the games on the SNES to come to an end. A couple years after the release of Genealogy of the Holy War, the next Fire Emblem game in the series was announced in various Japanese magazines. The game was to be titled Fire Emblem Akoko no Miku, which loosely translates to Maiden of Darkness, and would be on the Nintendo 64 disk drive. This was the only known screenshot of Akoko no Miku, which was seen during the Space World 2000 tech demo. However, in September of 2000, the game was cancelled and later reworked as Binding Blade, but we'll get to that later. In that meantime, a side project was being developed for the Super Famicom, but as the game evolved, it would eventually turn into its own full-sized Fire Emblem game. This is Fire Emblem Thracia 776. Fire Emblem Thracia 776 is the fifth installment of the Fire Emblem series and the last on the Super Famicom. The game was originally released through a Nintendo Power Service on September 1st, 1999. The ROM dump of the game was leaked to the internet on January 1st, 2000 during the last days of the Super Famicom. So with that little history lesson out of the way, let's get started with Thracia 776. Fire Emblem Thracia 776 is a midquel that takes place between chapters 5 and 8 of the previous game, Genealogy of the Holy War, a year before chapter 6 specifically. The game takes place on the Thracian Peninsula in southeastern Yggdrasil. Main protagonist Leif is the disposed heir of the Republic of Manster, who was rescued from an attack from Thracian forces by Finn, a friend of Selip's father Sigurd. One day, the villagers' protectors are routing the bandits when the new Duke of Manster, Raedric, attacks the village and kidnaps two of Leif's most important friends. Devastated by the destruction of his village and his friends' abductions, Leif decides to take on the forces of Thracia and retake Manster. Eventually, Leif's forces are able to reach Raedric, in which they fight him, only for Raedric to be transformed into the undead being known as the Dead Lord Moose. Leif now has to destroy the Dead Lord Moose in order to defend Manster and northern Thracia from the Granval army. I really like how this story relates to the previous game, and how all of this is happening during the Yggdrasil War. Though the story isn't perfect, but I'll get to that later. Thracia 776 is very well known for its complex gameplay system and mechanics. Some of these mechanics will become staples of the Fire Emblem series. First off, there's Fog of War combat, which is also known as night combat. In Fog of War combat, your visibility is limited to a few tiles around each character. Torches and torch staves will be able to increase the radius and help you see more clearly of the map. While I do like this new idea of map structure and level design, it has some great flaws to it, and I'll get to that soon enough. The next thing I must address is the capturing command. When attempting to capture an enemy, the unit trying to capture the enemy will have their stats halved. The enemy's HP must be reduced to 0 in order for the capture command to actually work. If you successfully capture an enemy, you can hold on to them and take anything from their inventory. This is a really neat new mechanic for which I would like to see a return to in the series. Following that, we have the fatigue system. When your units perform certain actions, they will gain various points of fatigue. If they exceed the maximum amount, then they cannot participate within the next chapter. This encourages players to use units more sparingly as well as use more characters. And of course, fatigue can be cured with stamina drinks. While I do give credit for this concept being a little more realistic, that doesn't always mean that realism is actually good. And I'll get to my flaws with the fatigue system soon. Thracia 776 had also the introduction to guidance chapters or side quest chapters. If the player is able to achieve certain conditions in certain chapters, then these bonus chapters will be unlocked, and they usually contain valuable items and characters, so be sure to achieve those conditions. Escape chapters were also introduced in Thracia 776. These chapters actually make up the bulk of the first half of the game, mainly because all of your units are lacking resources and you're rather limited in what you can do. Unlike other escape chapters in the franchise, where you either had to get your lord to the escape zone or get everyone to the escape zone, in this game you can actually leave units behind and then get them back in the guidance chapters when applicable. Next up is the dismount feature to Cavaliers, which only happens if you are inside a castle or dungeon, and you'll have to dismount your horses from your Cavalier units and they'd only be given swords. And this can severely cripple them. Most Cavaliers in Thracia 776 are either equipped with lances or axes, so it definitely makes them difficult to use a sword, and especially when they don't have their mounted horse. And finally, there is the introduction of the rescue command, which would become a staple in the classic Fire Emblem games on the Game Boy Advanced. This command allows one character to pick up another in which they would be completely safe. This is really helpful, especially if the unit in question has really low HP and needs to have a rescue. However, if the character that is carrying another character dies, then the character that was rescued is now back onto the field and is now vulnerable to enemies, because he has really low HP. Mounted units like Cavaliers and Paladins cannot be rescued, but they can rescue characters heavier than them like Knights or Generals. And if they have maximum build, they cannot be rescued. I really love this mechanic as it allows you to save really important characters who have really low HP. It also helps ease the difficulty a bit, but I'll get to the difficulty soon enough. Phew! Man, that was a lot to go over. But hey, that's just how Thracia 776's gameplay system is. It's really complex, and there's so many introductions. I also must praise this game for its improved presentation and soundtrack compared to the previous game, Genealogy of the Holy War. Not to bring Genealogy's presentation down or anything, but the character portraits just look rather bleh to me. Not in the case with Thracia 776, and then when you just look at Genealogy and then compare it to this game, you can definitely tell that the production values were definitely improved upon. Though, however, Thracia 776 has a lot of flaws that really hurt this game, and I'm going to get into them now. One big problem I have with this game is its cheap difficulty. Now, in some cases, the level design combined with the difficulty is rather fair. But in most cases, it's a huge difficulty spike, especially when the map is in the enemy's favor. Remember when Leaf and his allies get stuck between 6 doors and ballistas rain hell on them? Yeah, this is a recurring problem with this game. Or when Leaf gets captured and you have to dismount all your allies because they're all Cavaliers. Another annoyance I have is with the healing staffs, which had RNG applied to them. Yeah, that was kind of pretty bullshit. Okay, one more thing about the gameplay system. It's annoying and how complex it is. There's a reason Thracia 776 is known for its complexity. Introducing too many mechanics and features is rather confusing, as you have to choose the right one and precisely. With all this talk of Thracia's gameplay, you probably doubt there's even a story at all, and there is. It's not terrible, it's okay, so it's not exactly groundbreaking. The hard thing about writing midquels is that you have to be careful of how you handle the material in relation to the main series. With how Thracia was written is basically a weird mix between a midquel and a reimagining. I will give the developers this though. Thracia is in an odd spot in the timeline since this was originally going to be a side project. Shoji Kaga, the creator and writer of Fire Emblem, said he had to be really careful when writing the story since he didn't want to ruin the structure of Genealogy. A weak or uninteresting story can be forgiven if the game has likable and engaging characters in it. Though sadly, Thracia 776 kind of lacked in that department. Though now that I think about it, there were really only a few characters that had plot importance, like Leif, Ivel, and Finn. Even Leif himself, the main protagonist of this game, is a very vanilla character, like he also was in Genealogy. Though he didn't have much screen time, he's still really vanilla in this game as well. Now with all this hate I've given Thracia, you're probably wondering if Thracia is even worth playing. Now if you're a Fire Emblem fan, of course you should play it, and if you're looking for a challenge, then I definitely recommend it. Though I feel that Thracia is a rather average Fire Emblem game at best. However, there is one thing that I must praise Thracia for, and how it made it ambitious. The narratives and theme coexisting with Thracia's gameplay. Unlike other Fire Emblem games, Leif's army is not a royal army. He has knights, sure, but he also has bandits and thieves with him as well. You're constantly running away in the early chapters before you can get much support. You have to steal from your enemy while honing them down as you rip their gear off from them. The gameplay truly represents how dire of a situation Leif is actually in. If you're looking for a challenge, then I definitely recommend Thracia, but certain aspects do hold the game back in my opinion. Anyway, that's it for the Famicom games that I've played, and next is a game that I've been wanting to review for a long time, and it stars our boy Roy.